Okay, welcome back to math class, and welcome to 9-4. Today's lesson is going to be a little on the complicated side, so if you have any questions, please let me know. Feel free to watch this video as many times as you need to, but get ready to put your thinking caps on and really follow along, okay? Make sure you have your notes out as we go. Okay, so we're solving quadratic equations. What you already know going into this is that when I say solve this equation, what I mean is get x by itself, right? So if I had x plus 3 squared equals 25. To solve this equation, I need to figure out what x is going to be. So what I'm going to do here is do the opposite of what's being done to x. So right now I have x plus 3 being squared. So I'm going to take the square root of this side. And the square root of x plus 3 squared is x plus 3. But if I do it to this side, I have to do it to that side. So I'm going to take the square root of that side too. And I'm going to get 5. Now I'm going to minus 3. If I do it to this side, I have to do it to this side, so we get x by itself over here, and 2 over here. So if I had given you this equation, you should have been able to solve it just like that, and gotten x equals 2. You already know how to do this. What else you already know how to do, we've already talked about, is what to do with perfect square trinomials. Maybe that didn't quite ring a bell, but hopefully this will. We know that a plus b squared equals a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Right? We know. And we factored it both ways, distributing it out to get here and factoring backwards to get here. What we're doing today is applying this to our functions. So imagine, if you will, instead of an a, we have an x. X plus b squared equals x squared plus 2b times x plus b squared. Right? Now, most of the time, we're not going to be given two variables, well, at all in your homework. You're not going to be given two variables. These will just be numbers, and we're going to have to figure it out. What we're learning today is something called completing the square, which is basically, if we didn't know what this was, can we figure out what number this needs to be in order to make this a perfect square trinomial? I think maybe the better way to help you see that would be to just do an example of what I mean. Okay, so if I had x squared minus 8x plus c, right? And I was like, I don't know what c is, but help me find c so that this is a perfect square trinomial. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take, basically what I need to do is figure out this b, right? I have minus 8 times x, right? So I know that 2 times b has to equal minus 8 to get it to fit this form. This part right here is minus 8. And the c in this case is my b squared. Hopefully that makes sense. I just pulled them from our perfect square trinomial that we already know. The thing that's being multiplied by x is 2b. And the thing that's in the place of c here is b squared. Okay, so now we're going to solve for b, and once we know b, we can solve for c. So I'm going to do divide by 2 divide by 2, and get b equals -4. Now if b equals -4, then you know that c equals -4 squared. So c equals -4 times -4, which is 16. So I know that in order for this to be a perfect square trinomial, it would have to be x squared minus 8x plus 16. If I had plus 16 on the end, then I could rewrite this as x plus b, or b, which is actually -4 squared. Hopefully you guys see how that worked. Feel free to go back and watch it again to make sure that you understand. We're trying to get to the place with this one that we can rewrite it as that, so that the next step, which is solving an equation, will be a little bit easier. Okay. We're going to do one more example, but this time instead of just finding c, we're going to actually solve the whole equation. One thing I want to point out about solving equations is that it has to be an equation in order for you to solve it. So this right here is not an equation. There's no equal sign and then a number. So even though we got all the way down to the perfect square trinomial was x squared minus 8x plus 16, it wasn't an equation until I set that equal to something. So we solved for a perfect square trinomial, but we didn't solve for x. So if I'm asking you to solve for x, it must have an equal sign at the end. So we're going to start a new example like that. I have x squared minus 12x plus 3 equals 8. And I'm going to say to you, we need to solve for x. Figure out what x is. In order to solve for x, I have to be able to get it into this form so that I can take the square root of both sides and solve. But to get it into this form, I need it to be a perfect square trinomial. Right now, x squared minus 12x plus 3 is not a perfect square trinomial. And you can see that right off the bat because 3 is not a perfect square. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this part of our equation and we're going to figure out what our c needs to be in order for it to be a perfect square trinomial. Just like we did a second ago when we had that missing c. So I'm going to set it up the exact same way, where here my 2b equals -12, right? And my c, as always, equals b squared. Okay, so 2b equals -12, so we're going to divide by 2 and get b equals -6. If b is -6, then c equals -6 squared, which means that c equals 36. Okay, so our original equation is pretty far off then, right? If I have +3, but I need +36 in order for this to be a perfect square trinomial. What we need to think in our head is, how do I get from 3 to 36? What I'm going to do is I'm going to add 33 to it, because 3 plus 33 is 36. But remember, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So if I add 33 here, I'm also adding 33 right there. So I'm going to get x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 41. So now I have a perfect square trinomial, and I have what it equals. Now I can rewrite this in this form because now I know that this is a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to take my x plus my b, which is -6, squared equals 41. And now I can solve for x because now I can take the square root of one side and the square root of the other side, get x minus 6 equals the square root of 41. Add 6, get x equals 6 plus the square root of 41. And you can either leave this under the square root symbol like this, or you can put it in your calculator and go ahead and solve. You can round to the nearest hundredth, 2 decimal places, or you can just leave it like this. Either way is fine with me. What I want you to make sure that you do not forget is this is a long process. It had multiple steps. We did this step first, then this one, then this one. Sorry, it's a little out of order. Whatever, as you go through this, do not forget to add to both sides. This part is really important. The only reason it works mathematically is if we add to both sides. We have to have a completed square trinomial in order for us to be able to split it up like this. But you can't just add 33 to this side and do nothing to the other side. So as you go, you get all the way down to the end. I want you to stop and I want you to come back and I want you to say, did I add to both sides? Did I make sure my equation was balanced the whole time? If you did that and you did all your math correctly, you can do this. Just make sure you keep your steps separate and you don't forget the adding and subtracting. Keep all your signs right. You got this.